All right, hi, I'm Parker.
Hi, Maria. First of all, we wanted to. The first question is, what have you learned about leadership from the readings in the second half of the class?
Yeah, so the second half of the class kind of really focused on 9 leadership techniques or theories. But I think it's important to note that all of these theories are more related than like leadership, even though they're labeled leadership. So, kind of the first two that I want to touch on are transactional leadership and transformational leadership. So, transactional leadership is kind of like how you would like see most of the world today, and like when you look at like businesses and stuff. So, it's really like clear structure and expectations. All right. Yeah, so they have like that more business approach, like, hey, I'm going to tell you to do this. More like, do this, you can get this done, and then you achieve this, right? So it really kind of has that, but it's effective in short term goals rather than long term goals. But then the downside, I guess there's a big downside of this is that it doesn't really have that intrinsic motivation that like you would want as a leader. So that's kind of like why it's classified more as like a management style. And then it focuses on compliance rather than like having creativity or growth. Like basically like, hey, do this. Like you don't really have a choice of how it's done. Just do this to get it done. And then on the other hand, you have transformational leadership, and transformational leadership is kind of the opposite of that. So you kind of have the goals of this theory and leadership is that it inspires followers with vision and purposes, and then it strongly has ties into motivation. Like it's like if you inspire followers, like they're gonna be more motivated to do the work. One of the major downsides of this theory is that there can be an overemphasis on charisma, and then charisma is kind of like the third one or the next leadership style that I'll talk about. So it's charismatic leadership, and that's like a big one where you have like the ability and the strength to inspire followers to like follow you. So like, if you're passionate about a project, then they'll be passionate about that project, you know. So I think that's a really important one. But one of the bad things about charismatic leadership is that the people that have really high charisma tend to also have really high like self value, so they view themselves as higher than everybody else. So that can kind of create like a work conflict type deal within their organization, if that kind of makes sense. And then the next three that are kind of talked about is you have the behavior, traits, and skills approaches. All right, so the one that I really like out of all three of those is the behavioral approach, because behaviors are actions that you can observe. So like especially as like a coach or as a teacher that I am, like I can observe behaviors in a classroom in a practice setting, right? And then I can adjust kind of how people work on those behaviors to see how they affect others and stuff like that. And it's really like focused on more like of a task oriented versus a relationship oriented approach, if that makes sense. So then the other one would be the skills approach, and the skills approach kind of has like the technical and conceptual skills that like you would see when you're observing people. And then one of the downsides is that not all skills are equally relevant in every situation, and that's like the same as behavior, right? It's like not all behaviors you're going to be able to witness in a certain setting. So like you're going to be lacking, you know, certain things that you're going to see in both of those. And then the same also applies for the traits approach. So like yeah, that you have the traits approach is a little different though than the skills and behavior. Skills and behavior are very similar in regards to that you can observe some skills that will happen and some behaviors that won't happen. But traits, it's like it highlights qualities that some people have as leaders that yeah, just basically just like what they have as leaders, if that makes sense. But the bad thing is that it does not have all like you can't specifically say that like this leader is happy so or they're motivated so that makes them a good leader, right? Like there's multiple other things you have to take into consideration, so it can't just be like this one trait describes all leaders, right? Because you can have other people that, like I said, like if you have a happy leader, you can have a happy person that's not doing, you know, I mean, that's not leadership quality. So it's kind of like you can't just purely describe them based on the traits, if that makes sense. Then the next approach that we kind of talked about was a situational approach. So this is flexible and adaptable to followers' needs. It's kind of easy to understand. So it kind of dives into 4 different things. You have tell, sell, participate, and delegate, and those are the 4 different areas that they have. and it is all based on someone's readiness. All right, and that's kind of like the downside then of this theory is that it is very hard to determine if someone's ready or not to lead. Right, so it's kind of like trying to put that emphasis on having followers become leaders based on their readiness, but it's kind of hard to really judge on if someone is ready or not, if that makes sense. And then kind of leading into the last two or three that I haven't talked about. You have the path goal theory, and then you have the leader member exchange. So the path goal theory kind of like leaders clarify goals, and they have like they try to remove as many obstacles and as many like bad situations as they can for the followers. So it's kind of like they can really strive to go and get that goal. And then the downside of it is that it's just kind of very hard to like understand and apply like in a leadership style. And then the big one, the one that I relate to the most, is leader member exchange. So it's kind of like you have an in-group and an out-group, right? The in-group are the people that are like the favorites, like those are the people that are intrinsically motivated, research states motivated more to do better work and do all that. And then you have the out-group who is just like the non-favorites, and they tend to not have like as high a performance rate and all that. So I really think that's interesting, especially as a teacher and coach.
So leading to question 2 and 3, tell me about a specific example or like experience you've had, and how does this material relate to that experience?
Yeah, so kind of combining both of those. I think leader member exchange is the big one. I think as a coach, like I've been part of teams as a player also, like where you have people that are favorites, right? Those favorites are going to work harder. They're going to do all that. They're going to just, participate way harder. And then you have that out group, and that out group really is going to struggle to find that motivation to try to get better. So I think as a coach and like learning like about how, this class in these last couple of weeks, like with the in-group and motivation and engagement, participation, all that we've talked about, it's very important to try to put everybody in the in-group so you don't really have those favorites and all that. But that's also very hard to do because like humans are we're naturally gonna, go to someone and be with someone, develop a harder relationship with someone if like they have the same qualities that you have or like same interests that you have. So I think that's very hard, but you want to try to get as many as you can in the in-group compared to the out-group as possible.
That makes sense. Right.
But I think that's the one that I resonated with the most.
Makes sense. Thank you.